Hello, adventurers, and welcome to Zulu's Board Game Cafe D&D stream every Monday. Well, should be starting at 1. A little bit of a hiccup. We're looking into figuring out how to make it stream on both Twitch and Facebook simultaneously. Costs money, but that's okay because we love you guys so much. We're going to make sure it works. Additionally, we're looking into starting some more stuff, so look forward to that. Hopefully we'll be getting some, doing some sort of, the Zulu shopping network, especially with us getting into, the holiday season. So we want to try and make sure that you know what games are coming out, what things to keep an eye out for. Also, I would like to try and do, I like it being called Board and Alone, but also we might call it Alone Together. Where I play a solo board game, and hopefully I can get sort of the input from the delightful people out in the world to help me make my decisions for either good or ill. There's a lot of solo board games, and I know that a lot of people are kind of solo right now. But that's not what you came here for. What you came here for was delightful D&D, and if you looked at the title, you'll notice that we're talking about vampires and all other things spooky. Also, unfortunately, we do not have Alex with us today for today's stream, which is a real shame because we do always enjoy seeing his face and his input. If you want, go ahead and say that you lament his not being there. Feel free to hop onto the Discord, which I learned something yesterday, or last stream. Discord. Hey, there it is. So feel free to hop on the Discord. We have a D&D channel. We have all kinds of stuff if you want. Magic, Battletech. I like Battletech. I was going to put the map up on the background, but it was very small and very... ooh, there we go. So that'll be interesting. Anyway, let's dive into it without further ado. Jason, I believe that you recently purchased the Strahd Re-Vamped, the Curse of Strahd Re-Vamped box.
Yes. Yeah, and I thought I would actually, because I happen to have it, I've been playing D&D for a little while, so I actually have Ravenloft started off as a original first edition adventure, and that's what Curse of Strahd is based off of. And then it moved on. There've been several iterations. There was like the second edition, good old Ravenloft, which is what Curse of Strahd is based off of. I'll show you in a second. But a lot of the stuff from this is reiterations of the original adventure and that second edition setting. And it's all Gothic horror. That's what this is. And so
Now,
I'm going to go ahead.
real quick, but for those who don't know, who's Strahd and why do we care about his curse?
Strahd von Zarovich. So he is kind of one of the original bad guys. He is very, very much your classic vampire. You got that's just it's the Bela Lugosi-esque Nosferatu.
I thought Nosferatu had the two middle teeth.
Oh, I mean, if you go back to like the old Bela Lugosi movies, they all vampires as Nosferatu. But yeah, Nosferatu, movie is the German silent film. With the bald head, the pointy ears, and the classic. Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that one, but it is a magical piece of art that you should all watch. It's a trip.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. So he was cursed with immortality, and is trying to. He's also an accomplished spellcaster wizard, depending on which iteration of the game, and he is the most cunning of. He has plans within plans, and so you usually, in the case of the Curse of Strahd, get caught up in his machinations. And while you think you're making the correct decision, he has planned 10 steps. He's a good chess player. And so, yeah, that's kind of the adventure. It came out originally, it was one of the earliest 5th edition adventures, the Curse of Strahd. And this is the revamped edition. I'm going to go ahead and flip to my other camera so you can see it because I have it. It comes in a cool coffin.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to go here. Oh, maybe if I hit the right button there. Here we go. It's coming in. It'll focus. It'll take a second to focus. I'm going to kill a light because I have a lot of.
That is delightfully spooky. Also, I really dig the filigree on this. And it's got a raven on the front of it because it's Ravenloft.
Yeah. Ravenloft is the name of his castle.
Oh, okay, Castle Ravenloft. And if I remember correctly, the territory they're in is Barovia.
Yes, Barovia.
Yeah.
It is, the stand-in for Transylvania. So in the box, you of course have Strahd's corpse right
Oh, that's
away.
really cool, actually.
That's the kind of insert there, but it's more than just a little insert because, it is just insert, but on the other side, you have his statistics.
Oh, is that Strahd's stat block?
Yes, the stat block
Strahd
on the back.
Vamped.
It's hard to make out, and because I have the lights down low because I'll have the tuner reflection otherwise. Easy access, but so there it is. You can see there
fun.
He's rest in his coffin. I'm gonna go ahead and put this over here. It comes with, this is the Curse of Strahd Re-Vamped. Much the same art, has a nice little holes.
Oh, so the book is actually different.
It's different. It's actually a soft cover, which at first I was like, oh, it's a soft cover, but I like it a little more because you can lay it flat.
Oh.
And they've actually separated into multiple books, like an old school box set. So this is the monsters and NPCs are in a separate book.
Oh, that's fun.
So yes, and it has, it's still full color.
Yeah.
It has. So I'm gonna go ahead and there's the Curse of Strahd Re-Vamped. And one of the big things, what does the revamp mean? What did they change? Because this is a 5th edition book they're adjusting. Is, well, if you caught earlier, Wizards of the Coast is making a big push to make things a little less, for lack of a better term, racist. Yeah, they had the Vistani. Vistani are still in the game. There are stand-ins for travelers or
gypsies,
the Romani or gypsies, quote unquote. That's not the preferred nomenclature anymore. But they were literally described as liking to rip people off and drinking a lot. So they've gone in and kind of given them a lot more personality than just a real basic.
Made him more of a 3-dimensional character as opposed to just sort of racist stand-in.
Yeah,
well, that's fun.
That's part of it.
I feel like from the little that I've heard so far, there's a lot of very interesting sort of lore and a lot of fun stuff in there anyway. So like fleshing it out, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's primarily what they've done. That's the biggest in this book. That, and on top of, they've kind of updated made it a little bit nicer to flip through. Honestly,
yeah.
I just find a lot of the art. The art is still good, but it's all just, you can see it's a good.
So are those the maps from the original book? Because I know they've gone to they have an amazing map artist. I love his stuff. It's so beautiful. I forgot his name. He actually has his own, he does a free map a day on his website.
Yeah. Tyson Logos is the name of the guy who does the art you're thinking of.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
I believe this is his.
This is his stuff still.
Yeah, it
okay. Because I know that I love the cities in these ones. There's just such beautiful things. There's actually one of the things I really loved about the Icewind Dale book is just the art for the cities is so pretty.
Yeah, it is. Let's see. Here we go. And then we've also got the Creatures of Horror, which this includes the NPCs, all the stat blocks, and it's just a smaller book. I mean, it's very, very thin, but it's about 20 pages. But it's nice to have this separate, where it's not just in the back of the book. I do like that. When you need to pull up, so
you can have the map out and the monsters out at the same time.
Well, yeah, and then they have all the stuff, player handouts. So you can.
Oh my gosh! So you don't actually have to make your own. You can now. No. I can see that one of them there has 2 things on a single page. Is that the front? The next one I want to say.
Of a page from the Tome of Strahd on this one.
Okay.
And then from the Journal of Rudolf van Richten, which is kind of the
Van Helsing.
Van Helsing, yeah. Yep. So we got that. And also, I actually thought about this today. We currently have, they just came out with 4 this edition, pre-painted minis. That includes Strahd.
The Strahd ones.
There's a hag that plays a major role in this story.
There's a couple of them, if I remember correctly.
Basically kind of a different version of a Baba Yaga type character. Baba, I'd have to look at it. It's right now. It's got to be the first one because it's a B. The name is Baba Lazaga. And she's got a house
they
made
really
out of
changed the name on that one.
Yeah, it's very similar. But then you have all different letters and stuff that pop in, like Strahd's invitation. And so that I like having handouts for players. And this is it came with a Taroka deck, that's actually I actually can show you in second edition D&D. They had a Taroka deck. This is the original one.
Well, that's fun.
Which has different art, but I'll show in a second. But this is the instructions with how to do how to use it in the game, like to use it as a fortune-telling device for the characters, or just even make characters, because the suits are all based off of D&D classes.
So I got the deck a while ago with the idea that I could use it for coming up with ideas for storylines or that sort of thing, and I really wanted to use it to make characters. So if that's an option, then that is very cool.
Yeah, you can I don't know if it's in here. So I have to say I haven't read through everything in here. The Tarot deck was in the back of it because I played this. I haven't played the 5th edition version. I've read through different stuff, but I have like the 2nd edition. It was based more off of this concept of the demi-plane of dread, and so like there's major arcana in the Tarot deck that represent things from there, and they're still in there. So I'm not curious. I'm curious how they apply in here. I mean, I have to really look into it, but yes. And we also have fold-out maps. These are great. These are the same art from the book, but they are huge. This is the Barovian maps of like all the different
areas.
It's
such a big, beautiful map. I am.
Yeah, and on the back, you do even have Strahd's castle.
Ooh. So maybe not something the players will get to look at a lot, but definitely.
Although it is one of those. Yeah, but it's still useful. It's a cool thing to put on your wall and then this is the other big selling point for me, at least, I love the art here. This is the DM screen.
Oh, I like the kind of monochromatic look to the art with all the kind of big set pieces on it. I got.
And then on the back,
it has all the stuff you'll need. Oh, we're a little out of focus.
And stuff. It includes like a little quick thing to for like the oops, I bumped one of my cords, but it includes the mists of Ravenloft effects, and once again there's mists that surround Strahd's castle. So yeah, and it has like quick Barovian names and things like that for coming up with NPCs. It's
yeah.
A good little
quick names are always helpful.
Yes. And then the Taroka deck, and it comes with I'll show the Taroka deck in a second, but it has these are postcards, so you can actually send them to your players before the adventure to like invite them to play. You got the spend a night in the dev house.
Oh wait, are they actual? So they're actual postcards that you could send in the mail?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh wow! I thought it was more of like a oh that's fun.
Welcome to Barovia.
See now. I want every one of my D&D campaigns to begin with a with a postcard that arrives at my house to be like, we're about to play D&D.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. Yeah. They're just a cool little bonus. But the Taroka deck, here we go. The cards are big. I don't know if they're different than the regular ones. I don't have
Are they bigger? They look like actual tarot size.
Yeah. So these are normal, about the size of Magic cards size, the Ravenloft original ones.
Ooh. Okay.
Kind of.
Well, and my tarot deck, I don't know where it is right now, but mine is again that kind of standard playing card size.
Standard tarot size. So this is bigger than a tarot card.
Oh.
Regular
tarot card. That art is beautiful.
Yeah, it is really cool. I don't know. I guess I don't know how it compares to the one that was out before, but like, see, you can see Evoker.
Yeah.
So this is the I don't remember what they call it in here, but it's like the pentacles equivalent. There's all the different.
It looks like a pentagon.
Yeah, I can actually go back because it will. Yeah, there it is. It's the wizard. I'd have to look in the instructions because it's basically this. They're all different wizards, and this actually stems from the 2nd edition. So I'm curious. It's a little different because in 2nd edition there was pretty much just warrior, priest.
Yeah, priest.
Mage and rogue, or and so that.
Well, and then some of the races were their own classes too, right? Like you could be an elf, and they were.
In 2nd edition, no, but in 1st edition it was.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
and then warrior, and
Ooh.
get the berserker.
Oh, I love the just big beautiful cards. I think it's always fun, and this is something I think that we're going to probably talk a little bit about. I feel like in horror, kind of setting your stage and helping with that immersion is, I think, really good. So having those big meaty cards with the gorgeous art on them, I think, is a great way to help with immersion. Now is the box is a sort of come apart box, not a tuck box. Sorry, for the tarot deck.
Oh, for the tarot deck.
You know, I kind of think I prefer that for cards as opposed to the tuck box. It can be kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you were mentioning before that you kind of liked it being a soft cover book. What is it about it being soft, the book being soft cover, that makes it easier to use than a hardcover book?
For me, like for a source book, I prefer a hardcover, but because typically the only person using the adventure, well, it should be the only person using the adventure is going to be the DM.
Yeah.
But you can have this behind the screen and flatten it out way easier than a hardbound, for me at least.
Okay.
And also, I don't know, I kind of prefer. That it has right in the middle of the Vistani. So, yeah, it just, I don't know. Maybe it's the old school role playing game thing in me.
Yeah.
Likes the soft cover. So
Yeah.
but I do like it.
It is an interesting decision, to be sure.
It's not a chintzy soft cover.
Yeah. Awesome. I think. Yeah, it's fun too that it fits all in the stuff. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what sort of bag I would be able to fit that in, but I imagine, like, as a sort of set piece to be able to, like, look at my book, I think that's a really awesome quality. One of the things I love about the new art they've been the alternate cover they've been doing for the books. I love just, they're so pretty. Don't get me wrong, and that's actually honestly one of the conflicts I run into a lot of times is the art that they put on the regular covers are actually, I think, are beautiful as well, and so I have to kind of just I'm gonna try to get the special covers.
The last couple, I think they've knocked out of the park. The Icewind Dale and stuff.
That one has been gorgeous. I think still my favorite is probably Xanathar's Guide. Just the fish and the thing and the filigree along the spine. Oh,
kind of Art
beautiful
Deco
stuff.
look.
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate that sort of look. The problem I run into though is I end up using them because that's my copy of Volo's Guide or Xanathar's Guide, and they end up a little worn, which makes me kind of sad. But at the same time, it's like. Yeah. Just having it sitting on the shelf doesn't do me very much good as well. So,
we were going to talk a little bit about the nature of doing
horror games and stuff. Let me real quick. Let me address Recruit real quick. So, Recruit, if you go to the Discord, and then if you can find there should be one called Plix on there. That's me. Go ahead and DM me or PM, personal message, direct message. Either way, go ahead and send me a message, and I can get you a hold of who would be involved in talking about sponsoring. I unfortunately don't have control of that money, but I can certainly talk to the man that does. So yeah, horror. I think especially now, especially in this particular time of the year, is a very interesting one. I feel like, though, when it comes to D&D, horror is a very fascinating thing because, in general, there's a certain level of levity that I feel like exists within D&D. There's a lot of joking, there's a lot of fun being had, as well it should. Like, D&D should be a fun, entertaining, interesting sort of thing. But if you've got your beautiful new box of Curse of Strahd, Revamped, how can you make it feel sort of serious and scary, I think, is definitely a good question. I would say, personally, the first thing that I would say is don't push back too hard against people having fun. Ultimately, it's supposed to be fun. I think you as a DM, what you can definitely look into is trying to think of how you can evoke this feeling of horror and fear and sort of this sort of dark atmosphere to the point where it's not that they can't sort of joke and have fun, but they feel like they want to sort of like get lost in this spooky world. That being said, again, going back to that session 0, make sure that your players are ready and interested in playing a horror game, because it does definitely have a slightly different feel to it, I would say. That's kind of like that would be my kind of beginning thing is before you even start running your horror campaign, make sure that your players are ready for it. Because it does definitely take a little bit of a sort of adjusting on how you play and how you do it.
Yeah, there's also different types of horror, because you can have like a personal horror versus like just like spooky monsters. It's not always, because horror can be comedy. You have Shaun of the Dead, for example. Like it's based on horror premise, but it's not taking it that seriously. Although it is still have a thread of horror too. I mean, the whole setting is horror for the zombie apocalypse type thing. But that plays very different than like Gothic horror, which is much more romantic and cracking lightning and foreign locations.
Yeah, whereas also and then you also have your like Cthulhian horror, where like everything is sort of twisted and wrong, and you're just trying desperately to unravel the mystery so you can get away from the things. Don't read the books. Don't be careful about opening doors. Just get out as quick as you can. I guess step 2. So step 1. Session 0, make sure everyone's ready. Step 2, what kind of horror are you doing? So to, figure out kind of what horror you want to play around with, what kind of horror you feel comfortable with. And then I suppose, kind of figuring out how you dive into that. Let's see. Do you want to like talk about the different sort of horror genres and how we would try to evoke them, or what do you think?
Sure. So some of the more obvious ones, and once again, always check with your players, because some of these can, especially horror, it's a thing that can. Some people hate horror movies, and if they don't like horror movies, they're not going to want to. I like horror movies. I watch a lot of them, but at the same time, I don't have a high stomach for playing horror video games. There's just too much immersion, and like a lot of times, like I can play them and I enjoy them, but man, I they stress me out.
I think honestly, one of the scariest things that a player can hear is make something save unprovoked. Like there's so many times where all I have to do is say to my players, make a charisma saving throw, and they're just like, what? Because there's that level of this is like your thing, this is your thing you created, and anything bad happening to it is so terrifying, because it's like, what if I lose my thing? But I think ultimately that kind of disconnect between sort of RPGs and horror end up, I think you run into the thing a lot of times in horror, it's that sort of lack of control and that sort of not weakness. It's that you don't really have anything you can do. Like you've got that sort of Jason or what's the other one? The Friday the 13th guy? Michael Myers. It's that sort of inexorable, like you can't fight with it. And so much of D&D is, well, I'm going to swing at it with my weapon or cast a spell at it. Like you can in so many ways always just sort of like attack it back. And one of the things actually that I really enjoy about the about lycanthropes actually in 5th edition is that if you do not have a magical weapon or or just magic in general, you cannot hurt them. Like they're immune to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage that is non-silver or non-magic, non-silver, which is a magical sort of thing, because it's just like, no, these are unstoppable juggernauts. I had a very early sort of encounter with one of my groups with a were-rat, and they managed to hit it with a sort of a, what are those things called? It's the enchanter wizard's sort of ability they get, where like you can, if you're within 5 feet, you can hit someone with a immobilizing gaze, and you stun them and their speed goes to 0. It's a really super awesome power, but they basically locked up this were-rat with it, and then everyone else was just like, we can't hurt it, you're the wizard. Luckily they had a paladin that had some extra stuff, so they were able to do it, but it was this incredible thing where essentially they'd gotten themselves where they'd basically gotten this very dangerous thing, they've got it captured, or in many ways it's like they're standing on a mine. Like they're like, oh, okay, we're standing on the mine. How do we get off it without killing everyone? which is very exciting. Hypnotic Gaze, thank you very much. Yeah, Hypnotic Gaze is oh hey, it's the wizard herself. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I'll try to not do too many spoilers, but we are going to be talking a little bit about where you guys are right now. It's just a magical grapple. Oh yeah, it is. Although it's a much more powerful grapple, because grappling in D&D is like, oh, you don't move now, so now they're going to stab you in the mouth because they can't get away. Although people trying to run and grappling is great, but yeah, so that's, I think, the first kind of thing that in all of the horror things you need to kind of address is the fact that feeling powerless. Feeling powerless, I think, is so much the sort of crux of horror, and then sort of that climax of horror is when they finally found a way to be able to sort of beat the monster, to be able to do the thing. So
yeah, it can be tricky in D&D because of that, because like if they do happen to have the abilities to say attack that ghost directly, you almost have to kind of work in ways. Which brings me back to that. I was talking about that Ravenloft, the second edition. There was a big thing in it of like how you couldn't just easily take out the lord of the domain or the more powerful beings without figuring out their weaknesses. So like you might have the +3 swords or whatever it is, but it's not going to do you any good to go head on to go against the ghost.
Yeah.
And so you have to be a little bit more clever. But like we were talking about the different genres of horror, and you were talking about like slasher murders. One of the things to look at is like the structure of a slasher movie, which is typically that it's like a shark. The slasher goes around the periphery and takes out the weakest or the ones that walk off on their own. And one of the strengths is to not walk off, but things keep happening to separate you from the group. And that doesn't work fully in D&D. You're gonna have to, that's gonna be a hard one to do unless you throw, a vampire at them. A vampire can work as a character.
I feel like so much of like D&D, so much of what D&D is sort of mitigating that sort of horror factor of like, real quick, I have to address this. Your screaming living castle thing is a horrifying image to behold. How, both thank you and how dare you, sir, madam, whoever you are. Anyway. Yeah, so much of D&D I think is that whole thing, like you never split the party, you keep people together. And actually, honestly, that's one of the things I find very fun is kind of invoking. I love asking people very directly, like, so you're gonna split the party? Who's going this way? Who's by themselves? It's playing around with that expectation of like, oh, is this where things get spooky? But yeah, splitting up the party I think is a very difficult thing, partially because people
slows the game down.
Sorry, say again?
It slows the game down when the party splits, so
Yep.
it's also not ideal. There's nothing worse than it's not worse. There's worse things, but having to wait forever before you get to do anything is always.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things I discovered that's kind of nice is essentially with a split party. Essentially, you go into initiative order where you'll sort of like go around the circle. Each person gets a couple of actions, obviously a little bit more loose because it's not actually combat. But I've found that that sort of cycling through the people can be very helpful as far as like a split party goes. Let's see.
Usually, you ideally you don't tell them not to, but they learn not to.
Yeah. Well, that's
the thing. Yeah.
And I've definitely had that before, where like I've created encounters where I'm like, this is going to be a bit of a tough challenge. And then they split the party, and I'm like, oh no, half the party is taking on the challenge that I was like, this is going to be hard for the whole group. Like, is this where they die? Do they need to run away now? So that's, yeah, that's a very interesting sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
one of the other things I was going to say in terms of genre, the other thing is your friend is some of the optional rules in the DMG. So like we were talking about Cthulhu, Lovecraftian horror, the key to that is madness. And there are rules for madness in the DM's guide. They're optional rules, but they can work pretty well. And there's also fear rules in there. So like, making space for fear. Yeah.
I really should. I really should look
Yeah.
into that, because that is something I think, especially like when players like try to intimidate other NPCs. I would love to have some mechanics built in for that, because I think it's probably the number one thing that especially kids want to do against NPCs. That a lot of times I'm like, well, there's not really good mechanics for that. So I'll need to look into the fear rules, see what I can kind of get out of that.
I think it's horror, if I remember correctly. That's on channel. I'm just flipping through the book as I'm speaking. Just to...
Yeah. Well, so small spoilers for my Wednesday group, but so they're right now going through an area that I've already told in this that is at night kind of falling into the Shadowfell, which I got from this in Exalted, which is a game by White Wolf Games. You are these amazing sort of godlike creatures going through this world it's very fascinating. It's very anime, which I very much enjoy. But one of the mechanics that they have in there are called these shadow realms, which is where once there's been enough death in a place, this sort of the area between the land of the living and the land of the dead sort of get a little bit more hazy. So you can be sort of walking along and accidentally walk into the land of the dead, where things are just unpleasant in general. But one of the ways that I tried to sort of evoke that idea of this terrifying mad world is, again, I've got my little book of the Table Fables, which if you don't have a copy, Table Fables, if you like charts, I love it so much. But there's a dream section in there, and I got so lucky because I rolled two dreams, because the 1 through 50 is dreams, and then 51 through 100 is nightmares. And the first two rolls were dreams. And then the final roll was a nightmare, and so basically what I was doing was I was describing these incredibly mad things that they were seeing while on their watch. They're keeping an eye out for like monsters trying to invade and attack them, and like at one point the stream stopped moving and became they were near a stream and became this sort of black void, like this crack in reality that led down to this deep dark nothingness, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like the Cthulhian thing, I think the easiest way to kind of invoke that idea is to kind of mess around with your players' expectations of what reality is. So describe things as you normally would as you're going through, and feel free to get creative with your imagery, and then have it so that you just kind of you're just that wasn't real. That was the thing that you did not see. That was the thing that your character experienced. Because if you don't lead with, you have a vision, and it looks like this. If you just start describing something that's like truly mad, the player starts thinking to themselves, well, what happens? Because in so many ways, as the DM, you are the window into the reality that they're living in. So if you start giving them sort of incongruous information, it creates this delightful sort of sense of discord, which I feel really helps invoke that Cthulhian sort of like, is this really what my character's feeling? Or have I started to lose my mind? And then peppering in some roles in there, I think, can also do wonders to sort of play around with their sense of security, where like after you describe this great maddening sort of thing where a horse of black or a stag of black water sort of rises up out of the creek, stares them unblinking with these two points of light that are stars into other dimensions and other galaxies, and then it wanders off into the woods. End that with, can I get a wisdom saving throw? Quickest and easiest way to terrify your players.
Another one that I've always found, I haven't been doing as much as not playing in person as much, but just the subtle roll a dice for no reason. You may have no reason whatsoever, and you can just kind of nod and move the dice back. Don't let them see the result. It doesn't matter because you were just rolling to roll the dice. But that especially when they ask a question, they go, "Oh, well, is there something in the corner?" No. You don't care what you rolled, but that creates that like, wait, there's something in the corner.
Yep.
And they'll investigate that corner while you went the other corner. In the other corner of the room there is something.
Yeah.
The other thing I like to do, it's a thing that I've done a few times, is I'll start arbitrary countdowns. So I will bring something.
That's diabolic. I love it.
Like stones, and I'll start lining them up turn by turn. Or every time something happens, like they miss a roll, just put a token out, and they go, "What's that for?" And you go, "Well, you'll find out."
Yeah.
And sometimes, but that also throws them off when you do mean something from it, because the first couple times you do it for no reason, and then you're slowly building, and that works for not just horror but any tension.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of you can do that to, like, once there's a certain amount of weight on a bridge, you're putting, like, they don't know why you're putting the things
Oh
out, but you're
yeah,
kind of keeping track of, if they put too much stuff on there,
yeah.
that's going to start breaking or increase difficulties or whatever.
So in let me see if I can remember this one. In Tales from the Yawning Portal, there we go. One of the campaign is the suspense. Oh yeah, so the campaign they're in actually is one of the ones that I really thoroughly enjoy, because I've essentially created this enemy that is this sort of ubiquitous group that is simultaneously very obvious about who they are and also very much not. Also, simultaneously, they do a lot to sort of help the community. So from the outside, everyone else sees them as being these sort of good things. So again, it sort of helps create that sense of isolation, because the players feel like they're the only ones that are like, no, these guys are evil. Like, really, really, we need to kill them. And everyone else is like, no, I think they're okay. Like, why are you doing this? So that I really, it is definitely a lot of it's designed to be sort of suspenseful, because despite all, you could easily walk through as like a 5th level character. Most guards that are sent after you, you're gonna just walk through them. But now you've got a whole city mad at you because you've killed a bunch of guards. And I think that makes a delightful sort of sense of things where sure, and it almost has that kind of zombie feel. Well, where sure, a couple of guards aren't necessarily a challenge, especially for higher level parties. But once there's 20 of them, once there's 50 of them, like there's and then you have the whole weight of the city. So then the city itself becomes its own sort of villain, but one that's been sort of duped by the person you're dealing with. So going back to the lining stuff up, I had so in the Tales from the Yawning Portal, there's this delightful dungeon. It's they fall into it and they have to try and get their way out. But when you first fall in, you're cut off from the rest of the world. And a problem I'd been running into at the time was players would basically go through a room, they'd clear it, and then they'd take a long rest. And I was just like, this is silly. Just like, keep moving. Like, the whole point is that you're supposed to be sort of getting low on resources. But this dungeon, what it did, which I loved, was there was this poisonous gas that sort of was in every room of this dungeon, and every hour you'd roll a d6 and take that many points of poison damage, which isn't much. It's a d6. You can just take a single point of poison damage, but if you take a long rest, that's 8d6 poison damage. Short rest, that's a d6 poison damage. And so it was this delightful, and I didn't tell them that was what it was going to be. I just, at the beginning of that session, they had fallen in at the end of the last session, and at the start of the next session, I gave them all this little green dice, and it was delightfully putrid looking. It was, they're gorgeous dice, I love them. Everyone got the d6, and they're like, what's this for? I'm like, well, we'll find out later. And then I tried to like sort of keep track of how long it had been in the session, like how long in game it had been an hour. And at the end of that first hour, I was like, all right, roll your d6. I'm like, okay, what do I do with it? And it was funny because a lot of times when you roll that dice, you want high numbers. You're like, oh, I got a 6, that's awesome. And so I was like, oh man, I only got a 1. And I'm like, well, you take 6 points of damage, you only take 1. And it was that delightful sort of reversal where, under normal circumstances, you want high numbers. But in this particular case, low numbers is your friend.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, like I said, mechanics can have a lot to. Last night, actually, I ran for a one-shot horror game. It's a open source kind of game. You can pay for it as well. It's called Dread, and it doesn't use dice. It uses a Jenga tower to determine whether actions are successful. And so you're basically making a horror movie. God, my lighting is weird in here. All right, so it's that strange time of day where light keeps changing. Anyways, yeah, spooky. But anyways, so to do anything, you have to pull from the Jenga tower and then put it on top. And if it falls, you die. And as the DM or storyteller or whatever, you don't pull ever. You only tell the players to pull. So they're always the ones doing the actions. So like if the masked hockey killer goes to slash them, they have to try and move out of the way. But you can always choose to fail. And if you choose to fail, you don't die, but you get horrifically wounded. You might lose an arm in that machete attack, and or like if you were going to be picking a lock, you're gonna something bad would happen, like your lock picks break, or maybe even bend your finger back and or something. Who knows? You depend on it's always different. The example I was giving was jumping from rafter to rafter. If you're afraid you want to die, you're like, I won't fail. You're gonna fall and probably break a leg, which could be just as bad in a horror movie. But yes, but in order to do that, I also did another thing, which was turn down the lights. Because like in a horror, if you're doing a horror game, setting that kind of mood is cool. I had LED candles, that way we weren't doing with fire, but I had LED, especially near a Jenga board, and everybody's kind of tense. But yeah, I had a dim lighting, LED candles, and the Jenga tower in the middle of the table, and and just in general keeping my tone of voice very measured. We still joked around because it's a role-playing game. You're gonna joke around, but that made it kind of worse because you're trying to be silly, but you tense up
dark and scary.
Yeah, well, it's one of those systems where the idea of pulling those tiles, it really adds to tension. You say it out loud, like, yeah, that'd be scary, but if you've ever played Jenga, it's already nerve-wracking. But if you're like, you're gonna be out of the game if like your character is gone. And I the year before last, I did a one-shot in D&D where I didn't tell them it was a dream sequence where they were being haunted by a night hag, but that was what was happening. And so I did a situation where it seemed like a normal day, and I went, we're not using dice, we're using this, and put the Jenga tower out. And they're like, what? And if it falls, die. And all their worst nightmares were coming to haunt them. It was like all those enemies they'd never put down or had put down were suddenly back.
Yeah.
And they were trying to escape and just get to the point. There was a point they were safe. At least they thought they were. And so that was some serious, especially when you think like your long running D&D character is going to die. And I would let them think they died. And they were, it was a moment, but it worked well. But yes, I mean, you can do weird things like that. That definitely ratchets up the tension.
I think I think honestly, kind of atmosphere is a really, really good thing to use because, like in horror movies, if you turn the sound off, like they become half as scary. So I think helping sort of set that tone can be such a huge thing, and even having like in the background having like spooky music playing, not loud enough so that it's like sort of disruptive, but I found it's weirdly well timed on occasion where just sometimes a spooky noise will happen in the soundtrack, we played in Strahd back in the day, and we had that happen once where like there was a howl of wolves in the background, and we're all just like. It was also because he had like a soundboard that he could use, and so we were like, "Did you do that on purpose? Does that mean like do we get our weapons out? I don't know." So, that was very interesting. So like you said with the candles and having that sort of light, and I think also kind of your tone of voice as a DM can in many ways sort of set the tone of like. So if you could even say, like, the man comes at you with a knife, he strides forward, his blade swinging, slash, he's gonna get you. As opposed to, the man strides forward, his knife brandished at your throat. He slashes, and then he slashes. Like, so you can really change sort of how the scene feels by how you say it. So I think, like, lights, music... that sort of thing. All of those can definitely sort of affect the tone and feel for your game.
And the other thing in any role playing game, I think it's important, but especially in horror, is to rely on all the senses, because if you don't tell them what it is, because even the most minor of, or not minor, but the most more common of D&D villain or monsters can be horrific if described correctly. If you're describing the breath of the troll before you even see it, whatever it's last eaten, or the scraping of its claws on the stones as it's scrabbling over them, like
trolls are a horror thing though. They're long arms. They're regenerative. Trolls are horrifying.
They lean in that direction, but orcs can do the same thing with if they're as long because even just the description, you can have a character run away from a low level CR baddie if you describe it right, or if you have them do horrible things to lower level characters and see the aftermath. They'll assume that that's a dragon that tore apart, or whatever, a troll tore apart the village, but it was a couple orcs. But like I said, smells, sounds, limiting what information they get is huge, because so like in the game I ran last night, it was all about this mist that socked in the area, so they couldn't see farther than like 5 to 10 feet at different times away from themselves. So going anywhere was a gamble, but they could hear things moving in the mist, in the fog, and like they'd hear toenails on concrete, and that kind of thing would just be like, and there was the wild theories, it's vampires, it's werewolves, it's and yeah, it's you don't know yet.
Well, I think that's also a lot of fun, and I think again, taking from other mediums to sort of help inform how you tell stories. A lot of horror movies and shows. So much of it is that sort of not knowing, that the trying to figure out what sort of thing is coming after you. So other people's imaginations are always going to be so much scarier than anything you would possibly describe. So letting people's imaginations be the thing that's terrifying them, I think, is really great as a DM. And like you were mentioning, also the sound of toenails scraping on concrete is not a pleasant. Yeah. It evokes a certain sort of a thing, and I think that right there is a great example of trying to sort of find what things will evoke sort of a visceral response from your players, trying to figure out what things they sort of can connect to, what things they can visualize, and then where their imagination sort of takes them. And again, going back to the Bard's Tongue, one of my favorite things is once they start speculating wildly about what things are, feeding them a couple of clues that could be towards that thing, or could be with the villain that you've actually decided, if you've already decided what the villain is. But allowing their sort of imagination to be the thing that sort of directs how you describe things, I think can be great, because it's that whole confirmation bias thing where they're like, well clearly these are vampires, so you're like, yeah, the sound of, like, you find a person with puncture wounds, or they're exsanguinated, and that could just simply be because there's a big creature that bites things, and they bled, and then the body was moved. But it's a weirdly specific instance, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of the sounds I was describing was like a wet blanket being hit across a floor, just repeatedly. Yep. And it's like, what the heck is that? And then it's like hitting a door, and like that, the room is supposed to be empty, but it's the sound of,
Oh yeah, so do you remember I think it's called the Morgue? It was a third edition undead monster. I love them so much because they're the skeletons with the weird tentacles inside them. And yeah, so it's this funny thing. So the whole kind of thing is you have all these undead who think that they're alive, but they're horrifying to behold because they're undead. And so and one of the things that they do very very early on is they discover this undead who used to be able to talk but has had her tongue cut out, and so communication with her is kind of hard, and one of the things that a lot of times the players will do is they will convince her that she is in fact dead, and then of course there's the fun of her realizing that she's a corpse and coming to terms with that, but then when they return to the place where everyone else is buried, the brother has these like oozing tentacles with these like little teethy biter things at the end of them, and of course he doesn't know that he's undead, so he just wants to grab her and hug her and embrace her, and meanwhile these sort of tentacles are like touching her face. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to describe that kind of horrifying thing. It's also a lot of fun too because there's all these undead kind of going through what they think is normal life, but it's that horrible sort of mockery of life kind of thing where like they're shoveling hay that's sort of old and rotten and gross into a stable where there's just dead horses. It's such an unnerving sort of imagery that it's a lot of fun. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think even just in general, that's a good tip for any kind of creatures. Think of what they do in their off time,
yeah.
Or have them have an encounter with a creature, undead or otherwise, of like, that is more their normal. What does the courtship of owlbears look like? And do you really want to run into that?
Yeah.
Or trolls for that matter.
Yeah.
Or just, what is their standard hunting practice? If you don't have to be on the receiving end all the time. And that can also be a springboard for a story right there. It's like, who are you trying to protect from that,
Yeah.
that troll or from the undead, like, or whatever.
I think Jabel, yeah. I think one of the things that I love Shapeshifters in horror because it breeds the sense of paranoia. Werewolves are a great one because they're so much more dangerous, and they could be anyone. I actually did a little bit of like a Thing episode, like the movie The Thing,
Yeah.
which that one was a lot of fun too because it was a sci-fi game, which was interesting. So like their ship had come down, and there's a space station that's all cut off, and they managed to tap into their not their cameras weren't working, but their motion detectors were working, so they could tell sort of where people were in the station. And so I had the map with the locations of the people, and I would show them moving around, but they couldn't identify who they were supposed to be. Which was a lot of fun. And I think, I mean, going back to like things that like Among Us is a great example. Like it's this this phenomenon of that's going on Twitch right now. Which now that we mentioned it, we can put it in the description, so more views. No, not really.
Yeah.
But like that one's very interesting too because you're always worried like, can I trust this person? Like, and you have those things you need to do, but at the same time you also don't want to be alone, and it could be the person that you chose to trust is in fact trying to kill you. But that presents an interesting sort of thing because a lot of times having players that are sort of betrayers in a party is kind of weird because again it runs into that kind of issue. I think it's called Bleed, where the difference between your character and you as a person begin to get too close. So you can run into problems there where like because the character betrayed another character, you feel like that person has betrayed you. Just something I generally try to steer away from, but that's because a lot of times I'm playing with strangers and kids as opposed to my friend group. So with a friend group, I think it might be very fun and interesting to like start a campaign and be like secretly like, here is your goal, here's your mission, you need to do it, and then.
Yeah, the game I ran last night, it was friends, but we had it down to there was a betrayer, and
Yeah.
I put enough. Everybody had a secret background where they all could conceivably have a background. They had something open on the table that like said, you have this, you've been having headaches lately, you've been injured, and so like only one of them was the betrayer. But I said I of course said there could be multiple, like or maybe no one, and so the whole time they ended up all getting betrayed at the end because they all fell for it.
Yeah.
And so that was the ending. But that is a lot of fun to sit there but it was a lot of work to keep that like going.
Yeah.
Where the person who was a betrayer is trying to talk to me, although that aspect of that tower, everybody's focused on that. So while they're all staring, the two of us could kind of go, all right, you're doing okay. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Quick little ow of like, all right, I'm going to go over to the other side of the room while they're trying to pick the lock and steal their stuff, that kind of thing.
Well, one of my wife's favorite games ever is a game called Blood on the Clock Tower, which is essentially it's werewolf, but instead of just being townsfolk or werewolves, everyone has a role. Everyone gets interesting things that they get to know or information they find, and then you're trying to communicate and figure out who's the demon, and then kill the demon. And in the case of the Zombil, you have to kill them twice because the first time they die, they don't really die. You have to dig up their corpse and kill them. So that one's a great one. But anyway, and so what's fun about that is, and you mentioned the whole like trying to communicate kind of off table. I feel like digital gaming, which is I think the thing that a lot of us have gone to as of late, makes it so that communication is simultaneously easier and harder. Because you can do that where you can just hop out, grab out your phone, or just even on your keyboard. Yes, my keyboard is next to my chin. You can send messages kind of covertly to people to be able to be like, I want to be a spoopy. So I think what can be very fun is to kind of force people to be more sort of to mention that they're talking, because then then you can have that sort of that distrust of each other. So I think so. We've talked a little bit about kind of the kind of the thing horror. We've talked about the Cthulhian horror. Now, what I'm really fascinated. We're going to circle it back around to the more sort of Gothic horror. Because I've only kind of peripherally... I've played a little bit of The Curse of Strahd, and I watched a little bit of the dice camera action of Curse of Strahd. But what would you say... I've never run a sort of Gothic horror. What would you say goes into running a Gothic horror?
All right, so Gothic horror is your classic Frankenstein, vampire, or Dracula. It's usually there's some aspect of romanticism to it, and also like stark and stormy nights, lightning bolts, isolated villages that are under the thrall of the creature. Also, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there tends to be a bit of a mystery as to what's going on, at least for in terms of telling a role-playing game story. It's going to be a bit of a mystery, but it's a lot about like the villain's going to be pretty fleshed out. They're really meaty. They are very true character, although they're usually reprehensible in some way.
Would you say that in Gothic you often know who the villain is relatively early on? It's less about like who they are and more about how you're eventually going to defeat them?
How you're going to defeat them, and maybe finding out exactly who they are. You may know their name and you may know what they are, but in order to really, their motivation could be to find their lost love. That kind of the classic Dracula thing. And if one of the party members is that, or they're going to kidnap someone, like a family member or something, because they see them as the reincarnation of their love, type of thing. But you need to, the more you know about them, you understand the why. That is the key to defeating them, usually. It has a lot to do with a lot of the Gothic horrors. But like mood is a huge thing in Gothic horror. It
what do you mean? What do you mean by mood?
Mood, like I said, having the lightning, the stormy weather, playing classical music in the background is a good thing to kind of especially the darker, more Baroque music will help, because I played a lot of the Gothic. It's like the whole Ravenloft, that second edition, the thing with Strahd, that was really the other thing is like they're tragically cursed villains. They're not just villains. Like there's an ironic twist usually. A vampire gets to live forever and they're cool and sexy, but they never get to do the things they really want to do. Like they've lost their true love. They can't go out in the sunlight in some cases, that kind of thing. And so it's like romanticizing the villain is a big part of it. Like you might, they can have the revenge that you'd always wanted. In the case like a Frankenstein or something.
Would you say monster? Making them almost more sort of a relatable character helps to sort of set that stage?
Yes.
Okay. But then ultimately the twist is no, they're actually horribly evil and sort of, I guess
they're horribly evil, but in an understandable way. Usually. Yeah. They take it too far.
Yeah. Like I see why you're doing that, but no, you've got too far. I think
you're wrong.
Yeah, I think I remember something about like there's a this is a little bit of a spoiler for Strahd, so for those of you who are going to play it, stop listening for a sec. If I remember correctly, there is a guy, they've essentially put Frankenstein in Barovia, where he's trying to make a bride for Strahd, so he'll just stop. But of course, he's making a bride, so he's making these horrible monsters. In it. So yeah, I remember that one being one of those things where you're like, I kind of see what you're doing, but wow, why did you take the most evil route to do it? So, all right.
Yeah,
no more spoilers.
Yeah, that's actually from that Ravenloft, because there was a character, Mordenheim, who was also and the conceit behind the very Gothic conceit behind Ravenloft, the setting, was that it's a demiplane. And the mists of the plane would come out and find the most evil people and would take them away and give them their own land they could never leave, and it would imprison them. But other people would get trapped there with them.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it would grant them the powers over people, and like it would also pull heroes in trying to destroy them.
Oh, weird. So it almost made the demiplane itself like its own sort of like person pulling the strings.
Yes. And it was called Ravenloft because Strahd was the first one to get sucked into it.
Okay.
And so, of course, he named it after his castle.
Yeah.
And just and a lot of the people like Mordenheim were there, and they did such evil things. The land gave them their own place.
Yeah,
and if you were playing and part of the, and the other thing is temptation is a huge part of Gothic horror.
Oh.
So in Ravenloft, one of the concepts was if you did evil things, you'd have to make a powers check. And if you were evil, you would gain a power, but also a disadvantage. So like a low level power would be like you can see in the dark. If you're a human or something, that's great. But your eyes reflect bright lights. And so you're easily identifiable as a monster. Or you can run double speed on all fours. That kind of thing. They would get these weird, and they would kind of keep shaping you into a horrifying monster, or at least one that you could turn into. Eventually...
Yeah, you either became a monster or you sort of fought against it. One of my favorite things, one of my old GMs, we played... to be a younger man, we were playing at one point 3 times a week with this same group, between 4 to 6 hours. It was magical. College was a beautiful time for me. Anyway, so one of the things he introduced to me very early on was this delightful thing. The line was, "Do you desire power?" And that was such an incredibly charged question because, like, it was a lot of times it was exactly that thing where you would say, yes, I will take this power, but at great costs. A lot of times it was some sort of malevolent what's the bad malevolent entity that, like, by letting it into you would gain power, but it's slowly taking over your body. Or a variety of different things like that, but like that's been one of those things where I've really enjoyed it because I feel like it invokes such a sort of primal thing in most people, where sort of just being given things for free. There's so often people have in real life have learned to sort of distrust getting things for free. The idea is that there's going to be some sort of hidden cost there, especially like with all the marketing we have. So that's sort of like deep rooted in you to fear when someone's like, "I've got you this thing." You're like, "Well, what does it cost me?" So that whole even more primal idea of just raw power, like, do you desire power? I love doing that because then I present players with that other thing. The other thing that's very fun is 9 times out of 10 that's something that a player will hear in their head, which is loads of fun because again you're playing with that metagame versus non, where the other characters have not heard this. Only the players have, so they know that right now in this person's head they've got something going on, but the characters are completely unaware of it. Which reminds me a lot of, like, in movies where, like, the victim will walk into a room and then behind them the door slowly closes, revealing the whatever evil thing that's about to kill them. As you as an audience are like, turn around, it's gonna get you. And so that's kind of similar in this when they hear that, do you desire power? It's all of the other players are like, no, turn around, he's gonna get you. But their characters can't say that because they haven't heard it yet. Which I find very, very fun as far as like a tool kind of in my toolbox of DMing.
Yeah, and that works very well for Gothic horror. I mean, you can easily hear like Strahd saying that to someone, like the approaching the party, like the one that's picked on, or even the NPC in the group that they might have that poor the servant character they somewhat abuse, the kobold or something, and there's no reason that person can't be approached to say, look, you can have your revenge, I'll make sure that happens.
Oh man. and it could also be something like with the kobold or the servant that they're sort of abusing, like Strahd then gives them power of like, put this into their drinks. Oh, that one's a lot of fun. Although dangerous because
Strahd is, like I say, like masterminds type characters can do the cat's paw gambit, which is they create an enemy for you to fight that will defeat you, but they can give you the key to defeat that enemy. But you're getting it from the worst enemies that's just setting you up to, you owe me, and the whole thing is all my plan from the get-go.
Or, oh man, I love doing this too. You give someone the MacGuffin to be able to defeat the big bad. But something as simple as making it like a scrying focus, so that at any point the big bad can just look at it and be like, I can see what you're doing. What's even more fun too is to let the players know, like, yeah, there's divination magic on that, so at any point it can be looked at. they're like, but we need it to kill the enemy. Like, yeah. And he'll see when you're doing it and exactly how you're doing it and what you're doing it with. And at any time, he could be listening. And I think actually that sort of fear of maybe he's not listening right now can be such a there we go. Can be a little bit more scary than being like, we're always being watched, so we know not to say anything or to kind of like mess around with it. Whereas, if it's like, maybe he's listening, maybe not. Who's to say? Do you want to talk about the thing? Excuse me. So yeah, that's definitely a fun one for Gothic Horror. I do enjoy that.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, and I think that's one of the things that I do like in the Gothic Horror is having the big villain. I mean, big villains can exist in any game. They should exist in almost every game, because I think the more that there is a character for the players to aim for, rather than just an abstract, we're just trying to get treasure, or the more having someone that really annoys you, and you have a good reason to really dislike that character is important.
Yeah.
And I think horror absolutely requires it. Even if it's just a monster, it's still, you want to be angry with it.
Yeah.
Or as well as frightened of it.
Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoy about the campaign I'm doing with the Hands Around the Silver Marches is they know what the enemy is, but they don't know why it's doing what it's doing, which I think is one of the things that sort of can, because I feel like once you understand something's motivation, it's a lot easier to sort of predict on how it'll do things and why it'll do things. But if you have no idea why something's doing something, it's a lot easier to sort of misinterpret sort of the actions and things to not really know, like, why did they do that? But at the same time, also it can be kind of fun, especially like with Strahd, because he is such a sort of incredibly powerful force. Like, you can understand exactly why he's going to do it and what he's going to do, and you're like, well, I can't do anything about that. So knowing that is awesome, but, that to me I think is a lot of fun for horror, is that whole idea of, like, here's this sort of unstoppable force, and you can move around it, but trying to get in its way is really sort of difficult. What could be very fun, too, then, is essentially, like, going back to that sort of Gothic horror, if you know that Strahd wants the reincarnation of his lost love, and you manage to find her, do you have a tool now, or do you have something that you need to protect? Which I think is a delightful sort of challenge, because then the players have the option of, like, as they're being, like, chased down by Strahd's agents at any moment, they can, you're always, it's that temptation of, do you just throw her out of the cart? Because Strahd will go after that.
Yeah.
And so I'm the Jabber Mama. Under normal circumstances, I really don't know what I'm doing. A lot of times I like to let sort of things play out the way they do. But this campaign, unlike most of the rest, I do understand the motivations of my the villains, which is very fun for me, because, like, your guys' speculations serves only to tantalize me. And it does in many ways. By the way, your sort of your speculations do serve in many ways for me to interpret the information that you get for you in some ways. I'm not going to lead you too far astray, but I also, I am definitely listening to your wild speculation, and I do know why they're doing what they're doing, which I'm very much looking forward to you guys discovering. Yeah. Sorry. I really enjoy this campaign. I think having played through it once, it's so much fun to actually kind of know, because, like, it's so much easier for me to sort of, like, to foreshadow things that are coming up. Like, I have a map that has all of the locations of things that are happening on it, and to be able to put that out it's so delightfully fun. I'm like, where you need to go. Where are you going to go first, though? You've only got a limited amount of time. Yeah. Speculating in private. I'm not saying that's the safer bet, but and I'm not going to change the story because of speculations. That's actually one of the things that I have a very hard time with, is because, again, I'm very much a seat of my pants kind of player, is trying to respect when they come up with these awesome ideas of, like, oh, we're going to trap the supervillain by doing this, that, and the other thing, I try really hard to try and think of like, okay, so if I guess for some reason I'm thinking of like a Jason Voorhees kind of, or Michael Myers kind of thing, where they're like, okay, we're gonna put the the person here, and they'll come into the room, and then we'll attack them this way, and like the easy thing to do would be like, well, they just smash through the back wall, grab your bait, and then pull her out, and then drown her in the lake or whatever. But trying to think of, would that be what they would do if they didn't have the omnipotent knowledge that me as a DM I do? Do you ever run into that kind of situation where people sort of planning?
Especially when it would, you're like, well, it would be so. You get that in the back of your head going like, well, it'd be so much more interesting if I do this, and you're like, but does it make sense? Am I cheating here? Last night, so the game we were playing was actually set at Zulu's Board Game Cafe, and they were playing themselves, and so, but one of them brought up because I made some noises coming from the downstairs of Zulu's, and they actually said, "Is it Rob?" And I was like, "Oh, that would be funny," but that wasn't my plan. I was like, I had to really fight it just because it would have been kind of amusing to like, you would have been one of the monsters.
I would have loved to have been one of your monsters.
But it was also like, it was one of those like, I was like, I got to stick to the script. The more I veer from, especially in that type of game where it's very, I had to hit certain beats. The more I messed with it, the harder it would be for me to. Yeah, but I was like, it was so hard because it was actually like. All right, and every year they would bring up actual people, and I'm like, oh, I don't want. I want to, but I don't want to as well.
Yeah, that is that is a lot of fun. I run it. I had a situation where they were going to do a heist into a. They were going to try and it was in Waterdeep. They were going to try and break into this fancy mansion, and they were talking about all the things they're doing. And as they're talking about it, I was thinking about the magical countermeasures that the house would have. And I actually had to get up from the table at one point because I'm like, I'm literally just tailoring this mansion to be a counter to everything they're doing. And then there's other things too where like I'm playing Shadowrun, because I play far too many games. I'm playing Shadowrun, and they did a heist where they were supposed to get a package and get it out of this place. And they happened to have an air spirit who happened to have invisibility as one of the spells, and they could hit 6 people. And there were 5 of them plus the spirit. And I was just like, wow, I did not plan for that in the slightest. You get out scot-free. And like I had planned out this whole thing where like they were going to have to... There was this dragon cult. They were trying to get this skull out that had been added to the mix. Plus the guards that were normally there. There were these big spirits that were gaining energy from the sort of fight between the thing. And they're like, we don't care about literally any of that. We're leaving. And I was like, oh man. And like they even went to where the dragon cult had like secured the elevator, so like they got people posted up with guns. They just walked past it. I was just like, man, they got me good. Like, and I was even going to do like this whole like chase scene where the cars, but I was like, no, there's no way that the enemies would have noticed them leaving. They're just gone.
Yeah. Well, it's like for the D&D game I'm running, they managed to like they were trying to acquire armor from a Furbolg effectively. They wanted to kill a Furbolg because they're villainous characters, and one of the characters is a very large character. And like, this will actually be able to fit us, so it's be a place to get armor. And so they go in, and like they didn't realize that the Furbolg had already been killed, and the person that was hunting them was already in there. And I'd set up the encounter thinking it was going to go a certain way, but they managed to hit everything the wrong way. They just went in exactly the. And I'm like, I couldn't have planned it to be as perfect.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right. So I ended the session right where it's like all about to fall down, and they mentioned what they were going to do, and so I'm like, all right. So I'll do the in-depth write-ups for the stuff that they're going to be doing. Like they were going to go diving into these pools and stuff. And I'm like, do all the work. And then, of course, by the time the session came around, they changed their mind completely. And I'm just like, oh.
Yep.
It's one of those, like, I should have just kept it going. Because honestly, because I was like, oh, well, then I can, do all that. I mean, granted, I had to think on my feet and think what those NPCs would do. And so that can sometimes work well too.
And I think that actually, so coming back to that whole idea of trying not to as a DM metagame, which is weird to think about, but then also kind of to your point, a lot of times what I've discovered is serves me the best is to try to think of what are the NPCs doing, regardless of the player's interactions. So going back to the campaign that the Hands Around the Silver Marches campaign, so much of that is there are machinations happening all over the Silver Marches, and the players can essentially I give them the freedom to go anywhere they want, but because of that I have to think of, okay, if the players don't interact with this particular location or this particular sort of region, what's happening there? How will that change the story, kind of thing? And then also, like, I have to try and remember that the enemies don't actually necessarily know what's happening. Like, if the players, as they want to do, kill everyone at a location, all that the enemy gets back is, you lost a place. Like, they're just dead. Everyone's gone. And so for them, they have to then try to sort of change the stuff. And so a lot of times, and this is true not even of just of horror things, but just stuff in general, trying to think of what are these NPCs doing. If the players were to never interact with literally any of this, what would happen in this world? And then, you know, I think that serves me very well, I think, especially with this particular campaign where there is so many things happening simultaneously. But then even for like the horror villain thing, where like you don't want to have, because a lot of times you'll have that in like movies and stuff, where like Jason or Michael Myers, especially Michael Myers, I think they'll just teleport around the world, and you're like, how did he physically get from there to there in 0.5 seconds? Like, that doesn't make sense. And so I like to add that idea of like you actually know where the thing's moving. Plus, what's even more fun is they can accidentally go the wrong way and run into the villain, and then that can be their fault, which is hilarious and great.
Yeah, the main thing was like I ran into that was actually the thing that made me I basically in the previous thing I'd done where I'd locked two of the characters in a cave. The boulders had come down and I was like, well, okay, I'm going to give them another way out, because I didn't want them just to be stuck. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we're going to go swimming through these caverns to try and get out, because we saw there was an exit on the other side. And I'm like, all right, I want to make an interesting encounter for them, so they're not just not doing anything for the duration of the fight. And they're like, oh, we'll try and pull out all those boulders. And I'm like, do you really want to? It's like, because all they were doing was rolling dice. When it's your turn, roll dice to move boulders. And I'm like, oh, this could be so much more fun for you. There's like a whole
there's a whole adventure over there. Yeah.
It happens. And
I think that is the interesting balance you have to have as a DM, where, you know, you are trying to make this entertaining for all of the players, and you know, that is an interesting challenge.
Mm-hmm. Especially like certain spells and stuff where it like takes you out, and you're like, it's one thing for it to happen to NPCs and villains, but to player characters, that's their only character. And so when you're sitting there and like, well, I'm restrained and I can't do anything, you're like, I always feel bad. I mean, sometimes you have to do it. You're like, that character will annihilate the entire, villain party. They're gonna restrain that guy. Yeah.
Well, but again, that comes back to that sort of metagaming thing, where like, the question always is, would the villain know that person is the person they need to shut down, which I find very interesting. Also, so you mentioned I think a very fascinating thing, the idea of like taking a character out, which my first thought was, it's always fun to give like debuffs like Bane or something like that, but then I was thinking also, like, it feels different to have a detriment to yourself as opposed to a benefit for the enemy. So having your AC reduced by 2 is effectively the same as having an enemy have a +2 to hit. Mathematically, that does the exact same thing, but they feel very, very different. Or like increasing an enemy's AC or decreasing your to-hit bonus on attacking them, mathematically the same, but the feel is very different. Probably mathematically, effectively, it washes out to the same thing. So I think when making a horror game, you can really think about whether or not you're giving things to the enemy or you're taking things away from the players, because that'll change how it feels, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
So, and you can even, what would be really fun too is you can even sort of do it where it's a little bit of both. So, they get a small minus and the enemy gets a small bonus, and in the end, the numbers are still about the same as, you know, a big minus or a big plus, but it feels very different because, like, you're getting weaker and they're getting stronger, and you feel that divide sort of growing in both directions. I think that can really create an interesting sort of feel. Oh, that's always fun. Guilt is its own separate special thing. So the enemies didn't know that one of the players. So all they knew was that there was a tiefling in the party, and tieflings are one of those things. They're relatively rare. So this is a traveling tiefling that just came in. So they took a gamble. There's only a couple of them. We'll try killing this one first. And so they killed the wrong one, of course. And that was fun too, actually, because I didn't say exactly that it wasn't one of the. So I was introducing a new player character, and I was describing to him that, you know, these guys were breaking into this house and they attacked this tiefling, but I hadn't really like nailed down exactly where the player tiefling was, and she wasn't in the scene, so she didn't really get to like. So it was very interesting too, because I hope and Jabbermom, you can confirm or deny this. There was this kind of fear in the back of her head that it's like, did they find me? Like, is he gonna have to revive my character? And even just that lack of certainty, I think, can be a lot of fun to play around with it. Yeah. And that comes again back to that thing where, like, you're the window into the world, so giving them sort of misleading information can be kind of interesting. It's the thing where, like, when you're watching a movie and you can't really trust the narrator to be it's a specific name, but
unreliable narrator.
To have the DM become an unreliable narrator can I think definitely spookums. And I've done the spookiest thing. I've become out of focus. There we go. I'm back.
In a very similar thing, back in the day, I played Vampire the Masquerade a lot, and one of the weirder clans could reshape flesh, and setting.
That's true.
So one of the things, I had basically a character that really disliked the player characters, and so he took to reshaping people and killing them so they looked like the player characters.
Oh yeah.
So bodies were showing up that looked just like them, and they knew something was wrong, but what exactly was happening, and also that they were being reported as dead in the day. So in the media and stuff, it's like such and such wound up, you know, a body's been found and has been identified as such and such, you know.
That would be such a fascinating mechanic in a game, like to not tell them that there was a person that was mad at them, just to have their body wind up and then the players be like, why did someone kill me?
The person hired to kill them and he was just trying to throw them off. But yes, that was, so they didn't know anything. There were even people that could do that, because these were people who hadn't played a lot of vampires, so they didn't know all that stuff, so that made it better.
And that's always interesting too, is taking sort of players' understanding of mechanics and things and sort of playing around with that, I think can be very interesting too.
Another example is in Vampire, there was a power called Obfuscate, where you would just like make people forget you were there, or so you're still standing there, but it's basically invisibility. And the first time I played it, I had the players playing as vampire hunters, and so they knew nothing about how these powers worked. And so I just did this thing where this character came into their hotel room and he's babbling and stuff, and he walks in the bathroom, they shut the door, they hear a flush, they open the door, and there's nobody in there, and they think that he's gone through the toilet.
Oh man. Well, and in Vampire 2, the power level between a mortal and a vampire is insane. Like, there's so many things where you're just like, I murder people because I'm a vampire and you're a mortal. And that was kind of, but that uphill battle made it more horrific, and trying to figure out what was going on, and there's all these secrets, and but like that, but that was just the way of describing the scene. And like when they came in, that like just, it made sense to them that, I mean, actually they didn't even know it was a vampire. That was just some dude walking into their room and flushed the toilet, shut the door, flushed the toilet, and was gone, and proceeded to stay in there all night with them. Well, and I think it comes back to that whole. That's why I love Shapeshifters, because you're like, is this person a vampire? Are they not a vampire? Possession, also another great one. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up. But what I'd like to talk about before we get too far, because we talk a lot about being a DM and running a horror game, because so much of it is like, as the DM you have a lot of things, but I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk about how being a player in a horror game, like what you can do for that. So do you have any tips or ideas of what things can be good like player horror game things?
I think typically, if you're playing an actual horror game, a good thing is to take it seriously. Because if you go into it just like wanting to make crack, I mean, you can have a character that makes cracks, or, tries to be the jester, but be aware that, like, the common trope is the jester dies.
Yeah.
The one who's just the comic relief doesn't live to the end typically.
Yeah.
But you're gonna you by you taking the threat seriously, it helps make it more. Um, more you're more engaged. If you don't take it, I mean, you're depending on the DM always, the storyteller always, to make it something you want to buy into.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if they do just have a toilet monster, it's gonna be hard to take that seriously.
What was it? It was in Dogma, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Poop monster. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually one of the things I was going to mention is, like, buying into that whole idea that, like, your character at any time can sort of die. I don't know. Like, I think that's... Now I've posed the question. Now I don't know if I have necessarily a good answer for it.
Yeah, it's a hard one, because, like, I think staying true to your character is important, and not just making the easy out. Like, if you're playing the paladin that will not back down, you gotta not back down.
Yeah.
I mean, that stinks, because you're going up against Strahd or something like that. You're not gonna win typically. Yeah. So, but I mean, unless you come up with a good reason why your character would like, I need to live to fight him another day, because if I died, no one can oppose him. That's a valid reason too. But make sure that I think having a good grasp of your character is probably the strongest.
Yeah, and I think also not doing too much metagaming. Like, trying to keep in mind that if your character doesn't know sort of like the fact that one of the other characters has died, I think allowing yourself to sort of see them as something that you're watching, sort of almost like a show. Again, because it's one of those things where, like, a group of people is walking down the hallway, the person in the back gets snagged and pulled away. If your character has no reason to turn around and look because you failed your perception check, the monster was super quiet and creepy, then I think having your character turn around to look, I think, is doing a disservice to the game itself. But then again, it comes back to that idea of, like, failures, I think, are more fun. I think it's interesting and fun when you know that you could fail, and know that failing could be the end of your character. Like, and I think that adds an interesting stake, like a fun stake to it, when you're like, if we don't make our perception checks, we might lose someone. But at the same time, also, it opens up that possibility of creativity. So, like, you're like, we know that there's this thing snatching people, and that we're not very observant. So instead of relying on the dice, we're going to tie each other together with a rope. So if it gets one of us, it gets all of us, I guess.
Another thing to point out, that one of the things that makes horror a little easier is do one-shots or temporary ones. Because even running a one-shot within a setting, so, like, let's say you're running a D&D thing, you can give, we're going to run a quick, maybe even just like a half an hour of the game session. You're going to give them first level characters, and they're going to interact with the villain in a very different way than your players are, and that's going to be horrifying when the vampire comes out and you have no recourse and you're just massacring them. That can be a thing. And that can play on the horror in a different way than playing as your 15th level paladin will ever feel fear. Especially when they get frightened.
Because you're like, now I can actually experience fear again as a character. I think you brought up an excellent point. The whole idea of doing it with a one shot means that you're that much like this. The stakes are different because your character can die. And I really enjoy that, like, as a thing, as a possibility. I think that really sort of ups the fear factor in it, because you're like, I could lose this character. So I think trying to, like, slot in a horror session into your larger campaign becomes a little bit more difficult, just because, unless you're doing it like your dream sequence, which I thought was a great idea. But I think as a player, knowing that there's the possibility of losing your character really sort of ups the ante, so to speak. And again, that comes back to that session 0 thing, where, like, if you go into it being like, all right, we're going to do a horror campaign, and your character might die, and that will be a real bummer. Imagine do a horror campaign where you level up as normal, but when your character dies, you have to start back at first level. So, so then, like as the rest of the party, you're like, we have to keep this sucker alive until he gets strong enough. You'll level up very quickly, but there's that mortality rate, especially for when you first are reintroduced, is going to be intense. I think that'd be a lot of fun, personally.
Yeah, the other thing I was talking about doing the like one shot like with the first level characters at the beginning of a session. Another thing to do is like do like relatives of the character, so there is some tie.
Oh yeah.
Or NPCs that they've already interacted with. So if you do that, like I said, that kobold having that interaction where he can, you accept the gift from Strahd to do it, and you're just waiting for that other shoe to drop after that point.
Yeah.
Or he takes him away and turns him into his little Renfield, you know. Renfield from Dracula. He's the
oh yeah, he's the one that gets
the guy who eats bugs.
Yeah. Yep.
So the kobold who eats bugs for Strahd.
I mean that seems relatively normal for kobolds. Yeah. Now in the Hands Around the Silver Marches, we actually have a kobold that was killed by a paladin of Lathander and was sort of sunbaked a little bit, so he's now a paladin for Lathander. They were resurrected at the beginning of the game, so he's like, well, I clearly have to worship the sun, and that does not mean that he does not have his sunlight sensitivity. He still 100% has it. It's just he uses pack tactics to mitigate the fact that he is in the glory of his maker, and it hurts so much. Yeah, I also gave him the ability to cast daylight. which is funny because it only hurts him. Like literally, it's just a pain in the butt for him. I mean, if they run into a vampire, that'll be helpful, and there'll be some circumstances where it'll be helpful. But sweet Corin. What's fun about that one too is I've introduced a handful of NPCs that none of them are necessarily like story specific NPCs. So if I ever need to just like murder someone to sort of be like, hey, this guy's a horrifying monster, I've got a handful of people I can kill without many stakes. So yeah. I feel like this was a delightful session. I think this is going to be good for now. We were talking about in the month of November, kind of doing a back to basics. This last month we spent a lot of time talking about running games, what it takes to run games. Sorry, she says nope. All I'm saying is you have to protect them. If they die, it's on you. That's a lie. I'll give you plenty of warning before I kill them. But no, yeah, so next month I think it would be a lot of fun, especially because we're getting into the holiday season. So hopefully you'll be safely seeing people, and if maybe you can't necessarily see people in person, this might be a good way to be able to connect with people. Also, presents are a thing, so hopefully we'll have these as sort of videos that can be, you can send people to them and be like, hey, if you want to learn how to play, this is how to play. So we're going to be going over things like character creation, the fundamentals of the game. I think that it could be a lot of fun. If nothing else, because I think the whole idea of when you teach things, you have a better sort of thing yourself. So I always like to try and think of how can I teach things in a more productive way. But yeah. I think that about does it. Like I said, hopefully we'll be streaming on Facebook soon, so if Twitch isn't necessarily the cup of tea. Although if you're here already, then I don't know, I'm not talking to you necessarily. All I'm just saying is that we might be simultaneously, so we'll have two different chats we'll be trying to keep an eye on. Maybe. We're learning as we go. Some of you may have seen my shenanigans on Friday, the Zulu shopping network. If you are on Facebook and you follow the Zulu's Board Game Cafe, expect to see more of me and my hands and games, because it was funny if it wasn't a little raw. Yeah. It's all right. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Stay safe out there. Sorry, say again, Jason?
Oh, I said thanks for listening to us.
Yeah, I'll ramble on. I think this was a good one. I really enjoyed talking about horror as a genre and how it affects things. So, all right. Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next Monday.